Welcome back to the Parc Fermé for podcast number 737. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now.
AKA Negative Camera. You know why I've asked you here.
You must convince the villagers that I'm harmless.
That's exactly what I need you to do. Tonight, for your kind consideration, we're going to review the French Grand Prix. The French Grand Prix. Oui, oui. It happens to be Paul Charsley's favorite race of the year. No, it really isn't. But we'll get into that because, yes, as always, you know how we do these.
We watch one, then we talk about it. Then we watch one, then we talk about it. Come on, Todd.
That's exactly what we do on Race Review Podcast. But before doing that, I have to introduce my guest tonight. Now, I'll be honest with you, this man is the human Mentos. He's fresh and full of life. That is him. Exactly him.
Wrecked from out of the wasteland. He's bad, he's beautiful, he's crazy.
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charsley, the International.
You are fresh
right?
and full of life.
Yep. I don't know what that is.
You're the fresh maker, Paul.
I see
Yeah,
that
I don't
on
know it.
TV.
I'm Gen X.
I think
I
it's
don't
a
know how to do
kidney.
that.
I think it's I need a kidney.
This is it's a liver. Is it? I'm Gen X. I don't do those things.
Yeah.
So, Paul, right up
Yes.
front, I got to tell you, Paul, I want to congratulate you and the team on winning in Detroit last weekend. That's right. P1, Heart of Racing, number 23, Aston Martin wins in Detroit last week. Now, I'm a little saddened for my friend and your dear friend, Jeff Westphal.
Mm-hmm.
That was tough because Jeff had won the
Was.
race. But all's fair in love and IMSA regulations, Paul.
That's right. It is.
And how many times, Paul, have you come a cropper of those darn regulations and you just had to deal with it and it's racing, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is racing. I mean, it's part of a race weekend. You got to figure out, there's rules for everything, and if you don't adhere to the rules, you get penalized, right? So, and you have to take it. It's a calculation that it's not. It's not a sexy penalty,
No.
It's not like, oh, they were running, like a mass damper or something.
A bendy wing.
Yeah, but I do know the amount of work that goes into, at least on our side of the pit wall, is the amount of attention goes into making sure we're adhering to the rules. We're bringing the vehicle up to the rules and the refueling and all that up to the rules.
Mm-hmm.
I can see why it could go haywire, certainly for a team, because they're kind of, it was only their second ever race, right? So
Yeah.
you really got to make a lot, calculate. I mean, literally after every practice, we're looking at all these things and making sure we're in the realm, because we don't want anything like that to take our win away, which, so that's the way it goes. Yeah, I feel bad. You always want to win on the road, right? But you sometimes you win it, by crossing every T and dotting every I.
Yeah, by doing everything correctly.
Yeah, I mean, it's a couple of years ago when we finished on the podium at Daytona 24 Hours. Same thing. It was administrative, data and making sure you adhere to the rules that are set out that everyone has to play to. So,
Right.
but, so we'll move on. We'll take the win because we feel like we
Absolutely.
deserved it, because we.
Well, and that's not taking anything away from it, Roman and your drivers. I mean, you guys were P2.
Yep, P2. Yeah, we're running P2, and
Yeah.
inherited the win due to infraction. But that's, as you say, we've all had to deal with that stuff. At Daytona, we had a little infraction this year that stopped us being on the podium, and we had to pay the penalty for it, right? So, it happens.
Tough. Well, congratulations. That was great.
Thanks. Yeah, it was good.
Great
good night.
race for you, Ian, and the whole team. So
Yeah, and we're at it again this weekend. So there you go.
Yeah, where are you at this weekend?
Watkins Glen.
The Glen.
The Glen, 6-hour
Yes.
race. So it's good. It'll be a good track for us. So we're excited. Yeah.
So who's your driver lineup? Roman and who else?
Roman and Ross and Ian's coming back.
And
the
Ian's
long
coming
race.
back.
Yep.
For the long race.
Yep.
Cool. You're gonna put the elderly gentleman in
Yeah,
overnight.
elderly Ian James in. Yeah, at the beginning. Put him in early because he gets kind of sleepy later in the
He
day.
gets nappy late at night. Poor Ian.
Yeah, no.
Oh, that's great. All right.
Yeah.
So you guys will have to watch that this weekend at the Glen. The
Yeah,
Glenza Fun Track.
Sunday.
That's right. So, Paul, in between your other driving exploits, and I did see your family did celebrate you well with a beer flight, it looked like,
Yes.
for Father's Day. That was really nice.
Yeah, I hadn't been
Yeah.
home for like 2 weeks, and so yeah, I finally got a weekend at
Yeah.
home, so that's nice. It was good.
Yeah.
Good
Did your
times.
children act like they missed you?
No, they never pretend.
Yeah, right.
They just grunt. Who's that guy in the kitchen?
Yeah.
Make me a dinner. Yeah,
Make a taco, as you would
Yeah.
call it.
it's taco day. Dad's home. Yeah,
That's home. Yeah,
that's
right.
the most important thing.
Well, did you get to squeeze in one of your all-time favorite races, the French Grand Prix this weekend?
I did. I couldn't sleep, Saturday night because I was so excited about
Edge of seat.
seeing the red and blue lines floating in my eyes. So yeah, no, not my favorite track. I feel like it's a parking lot. It's a great track to test on. It's a great track for certain other things, but I don't think it's a real test of an F1 car or driver driving through a parking lot where you're just trying to stay between the white lines. I think
And the
we need a
blue
bit
and the
more
red
power,
and
and
the-
it's just not good aesthetic to even look at. You
Yeah.
know,
It's
just
dizzying.
it's dizzying. I'm hypnotized. It's like
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't get a thrill out of seeing the guys go through a bus stop chicane just trying to avoid the white lines. It's not thrilling
Yeah.
for me.
I know
Nothing-
the F1 guys like it because they can fly right into the airport right there and hop
Well,
over the track,
logistics
race.
is
The
very
logistics-
important for all of the fans. Yeah,
Yeah, right.
good for them.
Yeah. So they really won the logistics race. And the fans love it. The more executing and the more perfect the logistics are in Formula One,
Yeah,
the more
coddled-
fans love the series.
Yeah, the more coddled it can be for the F1 drivers, where they really don't even have to be out in
Right.
in the public at all. They can
Right.
just
Fans
jump out of their
love that.
jets, and run to their suite, and
Yeah.
then run to the track. Yeah,
The fans just
very
eat that
very
up.
important to me. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Oh boy. Well, we had the French Grand Prix. A couple key elements heading into this. It was the first race with the newer, more robust wing regulations. So no more bendy wings for those teams that had fell afoul of a rear wing bending too much under load. Also, born from the vagueness that was the Pirelli press release on what happened in Baku with the Baku blowouts and the hints and innuendos and finger pointing, the Italian tire maker increased the pounds per square inch. You may hear it referred to as PSI. So they increased the PSI in the rear tires due to those Baku blowouts. And I'm not quite sure many of the teams really fully had their finger on just how powerful the undercut and the degradation and graining of the tires was going to be here. So how did any of this or all of this play into any part of the race? Well, we're going to talk about it as we review the race. Let's start out with Red Bull. Max Verstappen taking the win in P1, Sergio Perez in P3. So for these two, Paul, it's a little unorthodox, and usually I'll talk about one driver and then we'll chat about it and we'll talk about the other. I love that format better, but because these two were intertwined so much intricately in the strategy, I'm going to cover Red Bull's talking points and then let you fill in all the gaps where I may have missed or where I've got it wrong on this one. From my perspective, Max lost the lead at turn 2 when he went wide chasing the rear end of his car, but he slotted, back in behind Lewis Hamilton, and the race at that point was on. Now, Max's strategy of executing the undercut to retake the lead and then switching to that two-stopper as his hard compounds were graining as much as the mediums were, it was the right call, and that won him the race. But Red Bull also pulled another sharp strategy call with Sergio Perez that had Mercedes a bit frozen on their strategy call, and it was a really good move by the team. Max and Lewis were racing hard on their second stints, but Max didn't think he could hang on to the lead with the pressure that Lewis was applying at that time and the graining that he was getting on his tires. So Red Bull blinked first. They boxed Max for a set of scrub mediums, and then they had the presence of Sergio still out there on that one stopper that kind of, made Mercedes say, okay, wait a minute, that kind of hemmed him in a little bit. as they had boxed Bottas very early in the race, that played heavily into their risk assessment to try to respond at this point. So Red Bull had reacted early to the Bottas box on lap 17 by boxing Max, but they kept Perez in play and split their strategies at that point, which is what Mercedes did not do, much to Valtteri's chagrin. Sergio presented a challenge that Lewis would have to have gotten back through had they boxed him and put Lewis on a two-stopper. But they also kind of thought that if you're Mercedes, that Bottas would present that same kind of challenge to Max, which he inevitably did not. So Sergio did a fantastic job to execute the strategy, despite not being happy with the car early on due to wind and other factors. But the teammates, both of them, played an instrumental role in how Red Bull managed to get one up on the mighty Mercedes. In the end, it was the increased rate of wear on the front tires that caught the teams out and pressed the race into a two-stopper. But in some ways, it really didn't kind of reveal itself until Lewis and Max were battling each other really hard on that second stint on the hard compounds. And by that time, Red Bull's split strategy kind of had Mercedes flat-footed with few options to recover from that. So, Paul, fill in the gaps or what I missed or what I may have gotten wrong, but it looked like that split strategy, reacting to Bottas's early pit stop by boxing Max, pretty much set everything in motion, and then allowing Perez to do what he does well, running long, managing those tires, really kind of, caught Mercedes in this quagmire of what to do.
Yeah, I mean, with Perez, I mean, I think, on the TV, they were talking about Perez having kind of a weak race because he was falling back, from the front three, but I think it was all part of the strategy, right? I mean, we know he can take care of tires, and you're not going to take care of your tires by running behind those three and fighting them tooth and nail.
Right.
So his approach, and maybe it's something Bottas should have done also, is not being, third in line in that battle. I think it's got something to do with his mentality as to where he wants to be on the team and what he wants to prove, right? But ultimately, Perez staying back there, and as we've talked about before, you can't just switch gears halfway through the race and say, okay, Sergio, we got to go long now, right?
Yeah.
It's got to be something that's kind of planned out before even the race, so that he can execute it as best he can. So I think that's kind of what set that ball in motion with Sergio. They were also obviously a bit. No, they didn't have all the facts because there had been rain over the night, and a lot of that rubber had come off. Normally that, just makes the car slide around a little bit more. So a bit of judgment call here from the car they expected they would have, and the track they were expected to have on Saturday to Sunday was different. So everyone was kind of, a little hesitant, I would say, to really, pull the trigger and execute everything the way they thought it could go. They had to kind of feel out what the cars were doing. So Sergio did great on lengthening that stint, and then once again, of course, did great on making his second set last well and still have some pace on it, which inevitably allowed him to get past Bottas. I think Max recognized what was going on sooner. Obviously, the first one to pit was going to get the undercut, right? And it was a tough call, I think. Still, I mean, everyone said it was genius. It's still a very fine margin there for that going to mediums to pull it off. I mean, you get blocked in traffic a little bit, a little mishap here or there. You would lose those 3 seconds that you needed to actually pounce on Lewis. So I think, it wasn't very easy, and it wasn't a slam dunk that strategy was, obviously the best strategy. Everything had to kind of go Max's way as well. And I think, he did a measured performance on the mediums also, because as eager as you would be to just start catching Lewis as quickly as possible, because that's a big gap.
Yeah.
You've got to make up, and eventually the gains are not going to be as high as they are those first few laps. So,
and it did start to stall a little bit, there.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until the last 4 or 5 laps when Lewis's tires really gave up the ghost.
Right. So they really gave up the ghost. And there's, as I said, there's still a bit of guesswork. You don't know for sure that's going to happen. I mean, that was Red Bull's roll of the dice. But Max, to preserve those tires and not be flying around for grip, the same as Lewis at the end there, was very, very important for him to actually make those gains at the end. But as I said, they played traffic well. The strategy was probably the best strategy, but it was only by a minuscule amount that it could have gone very wrong for them as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it had to be executed. And in that case, I feel like both those drivers, I think Sergio executed really well on what he did. In fairness, he and Lewis both were on one stoppers. He was a little adrift of Lewis,
Yeah.
But right after the race, I was looking at pit stops and I was thinking, I think in the commentary they'd made a mention that which of the two teammates would be more apt to take points off the main driver of the other team, meaning would Bottas be more likely to take points off Max, or would Sergio be more likely to take points off Lewis? And I thought it was a good point that they were bringing up, and I think the commentary team said you'd be more inclined to say Bottas. And then I was looking at it at that lens after the race thinking, there may be some truth at that at this point with Sergio still trying to get his sea legs there. He was on a one-stopper just like Lewis was. But then it kind of hit me like a two-ton heavy thing. I don't think that's the strategy he was going for. I think it was what you said. I think it was, he may have had an unsettled car, wind was difficult out there and that kind of thing, but it was measured pace and execution.
Right.
To remain back.
Right. You don't overdrive the car when the car isn't quite working for you, right? You can accept and have the patience. Like, that's what I said. I love about endurance racing. You have the patience to know that the race is going to come back to you. And obviously the Red Bull's running less wing. So from what we hear, the wind was bad. And so the cars were moving around a lot, but it's very easy to press on regardless on those parts rather than protect your car and see the big picture, see the ice ahead of you,
Yeah, right. So Max takes the win. Sergio Perez on the podium in P3, passing Bottas late and Max passing Lewis on the penultimate lap, and Bottas getting passed by Perez, denying him a podium. Let's talk about Mercedes real quick. Woo! Yeah.
Get in there, Lewis. Get down.
Yes, Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton P2, Valtteri Bottas P4. Lewis inherited the lead at turn 2 at the start and looked to be managing the pace and the race rather well early on. What Lewis and Mercedes weren't counting on was the undercut and losing the lead back to Max, but some of that started with an early box for Bottas, and this allowed Max to respond immediately, and Max had some really brilliant in and out laps that evaporated Lewis's safety margin. Lewis was hounding Max on their second stints, and it became clear that the race may be better as a two-stopper given the wear rate of the hard compounds. But Red Bull blinked first, and at this point, Merck had to try and protect track position, but to no avail. Max stormed back through the field, overtook Lewis on the penultimate lap for the win in a move taken straight out of Mercedes' playbook from Barcelona. From that perspective, Paul, before I get to Valtteri, I think, it's difficult to be Lewis in that situation, getting that lead and losing that 1.5 seconds. I mean, in fairness, the wear rate was greater than they had anticipated. Perhaps the increased PSI on the rear tires only made the fronts more difficult to manage, and due to the wear rate, you could see just how powerful that undercut was going to be when Charles Leclerc boxed earlier, made the undercut work, and then was much faster on newer tires for a terrific outlap pace. And to that point, Mercedes had Lewis exiting, by their calculations, they had him coming out 1.5 seconds ahead of Max, but they lost that completely by the power of the undercut and by a terrific outlap from Max. So Leclerc was the first sign that, that outlap on those new tires, big delta.
Yeah, although I think the Ferrari was a bit of a red herring.
Yeah.
Pardon the pun, the way that Ferrari was acting. We'll get to that later. But it's tough to know what's going to work for you. I was surprised too, because honestly, I can't remember how long was Max. Was it really just one lap before they pitted Lewis after Max pitted, or was it a couple of laps?
No, it was like 2 or 3 laps.
Yeah, see, that's the key. I mean, if they'd have pitted Lewis at that very same moment, or at least a lap later, there's no way he can't get enough time Your first out lap is going to be a little slower, right?
I guess
So-
I'm wrong on that, Paul. Maybe it was a lap after. I'm just
Was
looking
it?
right now.
It is
Yeah.
surprising. It's surprising to me, because ultimately your out lap still should be a bit slower than someone even on the used tires running around. I don't think the pace was off that much, so I'm not sure where Lewis lost his pace, but it was definitely on the in lap, coming in. So I
Right.
don't know where he lost his pace. I'm not sure it was all to do with the undercut working as much as I don't think Lewis maybe got the most of his in lap, quite honestly.
Yeah, you think it was his in lap for Lewis, but it may have been a combination of both in and out for Max, you think, or more mainly his out lap on fresh
Yeah,
tires?
I mean, because the out lap was because
Yeah.
he was basically by Lewis at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
When he came by. So, if he was able to put in, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, that out
That-
lap must have
If
been
he'd have put
smoky.
one flying lap in, that would make sense to me, But if he
Yeah.
was literally, he came in, then the next lap Lewis came in, Lewis should have still had the position. So, and their pit stops were very, very similar.
Yeah, I thought they were similar in time. It wasn't
Yeah.
like they lost a second and a half in the
Yeah,
pit
because
stop.
on those out laps, you're worried about losing, a track position because
Yeah.
ultimately you're not as quick as the one person is on hot rubber, right? But I guess, as I said, I haven't looked too far into that in lap for Lewis, but I think something went wrong there somehow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it may have. When he came out on the hards, I mean, he was putting tremendous amount of pressure on Max.
Hmm.
And it was kind of at that point, I think Max was ready and saying, "This we can't keep doing this to the end of the race.
Yeah,
This isn't going to work."
right.
So I think he realized at that point the hards were graining or wearing as much as his mediums were, and at that point, I'm curious if that's when they executed Plan B, or if they were always going to execute Plan B.
Yeah, tough to know.
Mm-hmm.
But as the track rubbered in, it seemed like the Red Bull got better.
Yeah.
And so when they went to the mediums, his stint on the mediums was very strong. Obviously, it
Yeah.
had to be. So.
Yeah. For Valtteri, he had a tough day. He had vibration, or at least that's what Toto said early on, that prompted an earlier stop than what they were going to. This allowed Red Bull to react and take advantage of the powerful undercut. After that, Valtteri was adamantly calling for Plan B or a two-stopper, but the team left him out, presumably to protect Lewis's lead, and this was frustrating because the Finn thought he could have been fighting for a win. Valtteri ended up losing out on the podium to Perez, but, like I said, him calling for it, them leaving him out, thinking that he would be an obstacle for Max if they chose to box and make a two-stopper. I mean, at that point, if you needed clear evidence, and it's a shame because, look, in fairness to Valtteri, he looked good on Saturday, Friday, Saturday. He looked quick. He looked thereabouts. He was a contender for pole there, and I mean, was there,
Yeah.
and to then get into the race and walk away from that race feeling like you have been used as road furniture to protect Lewis, that's got to be difficult.
Yeah, he's putting himself in that position, right? I mean, you look good in practice, but you don't win practice.
No, that's right.
But you can win a race in qualifying. And if he's not bringing it, he's literally has to get ahead of Lewis to get some kind of better strategy from the pit wall. And if you're not, they're always going to call on Lewis. I mean, right now, it's a really dog-eat-dog, race after race deal, and they need to protect their best asset of winning the world championship, and that's Lewis Hamilton. So,
and so were you a little surprised? No, hindsight being 2020, the team said that he had a vibration. That's why they had to box him. But at the time, I didn't know that, and I was a little surprised they gave him the first box and not Lewis because Lewis was leading.
Right.
And you normally would have boxed Lewis first.
Yeah, maybe, but Lewis seems to he's usually pretty confident on getting more out of tires,
Yeah, true.
And so I think Bottas, running behind them was obviously going to be using up more of that rubber as well anyway. So I think Lewis is confident and controlled, and we've seen him do it. Even at the end of the race, we saw how well Lewis was doing on really bad tires.
Yeah.
I mean, it literally for a couple of laps there was like, whoa. maybe Verstappen is not going to catch him because Lewis's pace right now is pretty stout.
Yeah.
There was ebbs and flows there, but Lewis is still doing an amazing job on the bad rubber. But in the end, he succumbed. So I think Lewis is confident going long on tires and things like that. So I think I wasn't surprised at all, actually.
Yeah.
Bottas needs to do something different. But by pitting him really early, he was the most likely to do a two-stop, wasn't he? But didn't happen for him.
Yeah, that's he was.
And I couldn't figure
calling for
out
it.
why they didn't bring him in to do the fastest lap, I guess.
Well, yeah, that's a great point. And Toto said after the race that they thought that Perez might get a penalty for the pass, and so they didn't want to bring him in case Perez got a penalty, and he would take him. And I'm thinking, yes, you may have gotten a penalty or a podium if he got a penalty, but he finished 5 seconds behind Perez anyway. And the other thing I'm thinking is putting him on the fresh tires and letting him get fast lap actually perpetuates your usage of him to protect Lewis by taking that 1 point away.
Right, taking it away from Verstappen, yeah.
So if you've already, beat Valtteri like a rented mule at this point, why not go the whole way and let him take fast lap away from Max? Right.
Yeah. I mean, what did you think about that part of it where Perez got by Bottas? Because he did go off the road a little bit. I can't remember. It's all red, white, and blue lines to me, so I'm trying to figure out what bloody corner that was. But as I said, for me, it's like all's good and love and war at that track. Go whatever. I mean, Verstappen shouldn't have been when he went off there at the start. It shouldn't have been so easy to slot back into second. But then on the other side of things, they had those big sausage curves that were just going to break a chassis in two if you got out there too. So it's like,
He was ripping front wings off.
Those
curves,
Yeah, so
crazy. And people were radioing Michael Massey, hey, about those curbs. I do love it. And we're going to hear more and more and more of this, folks, with the cost cap. So now we have a cost cap. So it's all about the money and the cost, right? So it's like, okay, Michael, these curbs are costing me about 80 quid, or this curb's costing me 150 quid or 1,000 quid, come on, man, it's tearing my wings up, and you're going to hear this because I can't afford it, and you're costing me money,
Yeah, right.
And at some point, if the teams are running close to their cost cap and there is a track that's extreme like that, that's damaging, I could see them lodging a complaint and say, I wouldn't replace it, but your dodgy track caused this,
Yeah, they look, those little curbs look very clumsy, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
Very archaic to me.
But I thought Perez pretty much had that pass done.
I think it was inevitable that he had it done.
Yeah.
I mean, he did run a little wide, which is, then there's the question, but so I wish there wasn't. We were running in a place where there isn't any question what happened.
Yeah, right.
But he was, basically Bottas was toast. So.
Yeah, he was done. All right, McLaren, Lando Norris, P5, Daniel Ricciardo, P6. The interesting thing about McLaren for me was they were able to run their ability to run their split strategies and get them to play out nearly in sync. I thought was pretty interesting. Two different strategies. They both finished nose tail P5, P6. Dan boxed early and used the undercut to jump Sainz and Gasly both. And then he managed his tires to the end, although he did get his elbows out, Paul, with Lando Norris early on in the race. And Lando was rating. He was mad. He didn't like it. Well, welcome to the majors, Lando. That's how they do things.
What you know about rolling
Down under.
down in the
That's
deep
Big
when you
Dan,
ain't
baby.
rolling
That's the
on
way
the
Australia rolls.
All right. No, elbows out for sure. I don't think Lando was. It's funny when you hear these little snippets of what the drivers say, and then get back in the briefing room a little uncomfortable for a couple of minutes, maybe. If Ricciardo even heard what Lando was saying about it, right? But
right.
emotions are a little higher when you're in the middle of a Formula One race for sure.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
Ricciardo's, he's trying to pull it out. He's had a crappy start. He's got to get back in contention, and this was a good race for both of them. And split strategy is probably a good idea, so they don't fight each other too hard at different times. But
right,
I mean, basically for McLaren, they finished ahead of all the others and pulled away in the third place in the championship, which is
That's
pretty
the
much
key.
their goal for the year, right?
That's the key. Yeah, Lando, he was left out longer than Dan, much longer than Dan. He didn't get the benefit of the undercut, but he did have fresh tires, and he made the most of that. He sliced his way back through the field, even passing Dan for fifth place. So, in total, as you said, Paul, it was a massive blow to Ferrari with a serious points haul by McLaren, and it's put them now 16 points in the lead for best of the rest. So, a big weekend for McLaren.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
much needed. They capitalized when Ferrari didn't.
Yeah.
So a good result from them. Not so much for Ferrari. All right, let's talk about. Yeah, I know everybody's like, yeah, I'll get to it. It's sad. Okay, AlphaTauri, Pierre Gasly, P7, Yuki Tsunoda, P13. Pierre Gasly, Paul, is single-handedly keeping this team in fifth place in the Constructors' Championship with another terrific drive to seventh. Pierre battled hard with Carlos Sainz, passed the Ferrari on pace, but lost out to the undercut by Dan's McLaren. Pierre said he would have liked to have finished higher for his home Grand Prix, but still, the cars ahead of him are all major contenders. And so he took comfort knowing that they were thereabouts. So good result from Pierre. Good qualifying, good race.
Yeah,
this is just becoming regular for Pierre.
It is what we're expecting from Pierre Gasly, and we talked about at the beginning of the year that bringing in Tsunoda was going to cost the team probably a couple of positions in the championship overall, and it's kind of panning out that way, where Gasly is showing the potential of the car, and Tsunoda is, last
being
week,
a rookie.
he was okay, and he's gonna struggle. He's gonna have his ups and downs, and when he's down, the team is losing points. So.
Yeah, it's tough. And if that team was serious about constructors' points, and then you would be maybe doing something a little different there.
Yep.
I kind of feel like, in this case, with Yuki, maybe there's tie-ins with Honda. Who knows the reasons for a rookie, and fair enough, it's their team. But, I kind of feel like you'd have been a better points hauling machine had you had Gasly and Albon together, maybe.
No, for sure. But it's like, we've seen this from Red Bull before. I mean, only this year have they grown up enough to actually put two good drivers in their number one team, right? And not experimenting and nursing, a young up and coming driver and basically destroying them at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's kind of it's part of their DNA is they like to play around with these kind of things, and I guess they're willing to risk, the ultimate prize, which every team's after. It's a better position on the championship.
Right. Let's see. Alpine. We've got Alpine doing a little better. You got Fernando Alonso.
No more radio, the rest of the race.
And P8, Esteban Ocon.
Not good enough, damn it, not good enough.
Yeah, that wasn't good for a guy who just inked a new multi-year contract. Esteban has a contract through 24. He ends up in P14. It's not how he wanted to celebrate his home Grand Prix. He said that the pace just wasn't there on either compound, and it did look like both the Alpines spent most of the day managing their tires, Paul, because Fernando started bleeding positions early on. Remember that? Everybody was getting around him.
Yep.
And he was experiencing tire wear, and he even suggested a two-stop or a plan B, but the team kept him out long enough to make that second step's tires competitive at least, and he was able to claw his way up to eighth from ninth where he started. He said the hard compounds were better, and with the results of the last couple of races they've had, this is effectively where the team is in terms of pace, so they're making progress.
Yeah, I think, as we're getting down the order here, I think the tire issue is becoming a bigger percentage of how the teams were doing. I mean, I think the Alpine was a decent car there, should have been fighting it out, with Gasly and everything, and maybe fighting the McLaren, maybe. But I think, just the ebb and flow of the tires and the new tire rule is going to take a little while for all the teams to figure out. Well, every car is going to react differently to these rules, because it wasn't just tire pressure adjustment, it was how they measure the tire pressures,
and it was
throughout
the
the
tire
weekend,
blanket
right?
Too the tire blanket heat,
right? So it's not just basically playing with its pressure, it's the teams have all kinds of different ways to make that tire be what they want it to be at that particular moment in time. And sometimes the rules can stop one team making that progress, while another team has a different logistical way of going about it. So
Yeah.
we know about it in IMSA. You know, we struggle, you know, with the Aston Martin with the tire pressure limits, right? We want it lower. Lower is better. Lower is better. You know, but and so you either accept the fact that you have to go at a higher pressure, and then you have to reconfigure your whole dynamics of the car to make that tire pressure work. Sometimes you can bring the car back into play and be just as good. And sometimes you're going to struggle. And I think this being the first weekend for that, some teams got their heads around it, or some teams' cars suited making that adjustment better than others.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to think that, like you said, there's more than one just factor. There was the PSI increase.
Yeah.
The PSI increase was just the rears.
Yep.
It wasn't an overall balancing sort of adjustment. So the rears have more air in them.
Right.
And
But you can't just do the rears you still have to always balance the car, right? So you may have to do something different with the front you don't want to do just to balance the car out front and rear. Yeah.
Right. So there's that element and what you do with it. The heating, the tire warmer blankets, the temperatures they were allowed was changed. So yeah, there was more than one element. And I agree with you. I think we're seeing that play out and have a material impact on some of these teams. In reading their post-race review, comments, I didn't see a lot of people saying that that's what it was, but you have to think it was an issue. Speaking of Aston Martin, you had Lance Stroll.
I want to know what's the matter with those twops down
Had him
there.
in P10. Lance had a good race, actually.
Yeah.
And Sebastian Vettel had a good race, too, in P9, given where they started. They had a tough qualifying, so they put on the hard compounds on both cars and ran long first stints. Now, the key to making this work, though, Paul, was if their car did well on the second stint tires and with limited wear, and that's kind of how that played out. It's one thing, because there was another team we'll get to in a minute that put on the hards at the start, ran really long, switch, and then made those mediums hook up and work without a too aggressive a wear. And that's kind of, so as they moved up the field by going long, they didn't put on the mediums and then chew them up and immediately get passed backwards.
Right.
So they still hung in there. And for Lance, like I said, what do you start at P19? And worked his way up to P10. So good result for him. And Seb had a good race, brought it home in P9, passing Sainz late in the race. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't awesome given where they were a couple weeks ago, but it wasn't the worst result either.
No, I think even from the results they got a few weeks ago, this is kind of one of their arrows they've got to use, they definitely seem to have a good strategy and a good car to accept that strategy with the tire wear. Now, that in itself tells you they don't get a lot of energy into the tire, and so that's probably where they struggle on qualifying pace and on some circuits where that isn't going to be beneficial, right? So
yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, they have to. I'm glad we've stopped the whining, because they really have to just get down, tuck their heads down and get on with it, which it seems they have and seems to benefit a little bit rather than just whine. But that's at least there's something positive coming out of that car. And I think the pace is a bit better as the few races have gone along. I'm not sure how much development's going on. And I think Vettel's driving very well. And I think Stroll's driving well too. So I think the team as a whole is maximizing what they've got right now. And scoring points, I think they should be happy with that.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Ferrari.
Hey, what happened?
What happened?
Mm.
Charles Leclerc, P16, Carlos Sainz, at P11. I'm not sure if it was the new tire blanket temp regs or increased PSI in the rears or the bendy wing issue, but Ferrari looked like a team completely unmoored from their previous performances in Baku and Monaco. Radically different performance. But I would say Friday and Saturday didn't exactly hint to this is what the result would be on Sunday. So I was a little surprised by this, that they were that far off. Charles said that they both struggled on both compounds. And even though they stopped again late in the race for Charles, for the mediums, he still couldn't get them to work. It's a shame, as they were running up the order early on, and even the early box by Leclerc and the subsequent undercut looked like he may be heading for a decent result, but that didn't happen at all for him.
Yeah, no, I think Ferrari were the biggest sufferer of these new regulations for sure. I mean, you just see how much pace they have in the car initially, and then all of a sudden it's just gone. And that just tells you that once the tires come up to temperature, up to pressure, it's going over that limit that the car's sweet spot, and they can't come back down from that. And so they have a few good laps while the tire's still kind of in that spectrum, but as soon as it goes over there, they're just like flailing around, sliding around, and can't catch up. So I think, as I said, kind of like with the Alpine, I think the car is decent and it's fast and should be a lot higher up in the finishing order. But I think how that tire is working with that new rule change, they were really way out of the spectrum, way out of their sweet spot. So they just basically, they'd probably need new tires every 15 laps to have any pace, but obviously the tire stops take time out of your lap too. So they had nothing. They had nothing for this race at all.
No, Carlos tried to hang in there, and he beat his teammate, but he was passed by Ricciardo and Gasly, and then couldn't hold Seb off late in the race. So in the end, Ferrari seemed to struggle with getting heat in their tires, and perhaps this weekend's tire reg changes really did offer quite a gut punch. Exactly when they didn't need it, because they lost a lot of ground in the best and the rest battle with McLaren, so not what they needed. Let's see. Let's talk about Williams. Well, Williams is not on the back of the grid, Paul.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, our man Jorge Russell up in P12. Nicholas Latifi, not as great, down in P18. George had a bad start. Let's face it, he lost 4 spots. But he quickly reached up and didn't hit the magic button like Lewis. He reached up and hit beast mode and totally recovered incredibly well to come home in P12, and what he said was the best race he and the team have ever had together.
Wow, that said something. He said some decent races.
Yeah, and he said, he managed to get by Tsunoda, Ocon, and both Alfa Romeos in the process, Paul.
Yep. And it's not often we hear about it. And there was no attrition, right? So we had
No
20
attrition.
cars start, 20 cars start. So his 12, every single place was earned there. So and falling back, he had half a race to make that kind of gain on all those competitions. So it's pretty impressive, I think.
This is a great drive.
Even though none of us saw it, but yes.
Yeah. Or if we did, it was not on the main screen. It was a little video over on the left side in the little tree.
Wasn't that great when you heard the commentary on this when this is going around?
Yeah, they're calling us that. Oh, Ricardo's passing somebody. You're like looking at this little box, and they're showing some. Yeah, somebody just.
It doesn't look so
around.
good on my little 13-inch black and white. I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Get my rabbit ears trying to figure it. Come on! I think I can hear Murray Walker. This TV's so old. Yeah.
It's crazy. For Nick, he said it was like driving on glass early on. He really struggled with the tires all day. Toward the end of the race, he said the tires seemed to improve, but he had more pace. But by then, it was too late.
Yeah. So once again, tires are making way too much of a difference. They're coming way. There should be silent. Seen and not heard, like little kids, right?
That's it.
We just need them to be those big black round rubber things and let the best car win. But it's getting too much again.
Yep. Now that's all we're talking about is tires. We're not talking about the racing. We're just talking about tires.
Not my car was set up. Oh, I should have put Ziffer springs on it. Oh, I should have done more ring. Oh, I should have, done this. I should be more prepared. It's all about, did my car work on the tire or not work on the tire? And if it didn't, then I'm just flailing around.
And you talk to the drivers and said, I just can't get the tires in the heat window and the performance window. The tires are graining too much. We can't get heat in the tires. The rear tires seem to be blistering, and the rear tires in the pound, the PSI were too low. So we had to increase it. And then tire warming, but it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm watching a tire Grand Prix,
Yeah.
And this is
not even racing gets another tire manufacturer. It's just
no. No, that's why I've been saying for years now, if you go back, it wasn't the first year Pirelli was a sole, maybe the second or third when they tried to get really cute and outsmart the engineers. I think that may have led to the British Grand Prix blow-ups.
Right.
But they were way too involved in the sport. Make a nice, good, durable tire and let them run.
Yep.
And that's why even back then people were saying, well, gee, Todd, what are you saying? You'd rather have a tire war and it's so expensive? Yeah, at this point I would. Yeah, I'd rather have Michelin or Bridgestone back in there battling at this point because if Pirelli, as the sole supplier, is going to get this heavily involved in impacting the outcomes of races and thwarting and trying to outsmart teams and thwart them and all that, if they're going to get that deep into the technical performance side of this and the gamesmanship, then throw another tire manufacturer and let the two tire manufacturers go at each other.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's just silly.
Yeah. It's too much.
It is. So anyway, all right. Alfa Romeo, Kimi Räikkönen P17, Giovinazzi in P15. Unlike Aston Martin, this is the other team that tried that. The team did start on hards, ran long, but they couldn't make that strategy work once they'd stopped for mediums, despite Kimi saying that he had a really good pace on the mediums. So they made some progress by going deep, put those mediums on and drifted backwards where the Aston Martins did not. So yeah, he said those mediums had decent pace. Antonio echoed Kimi in wondering where the pace went when they've shown in the last few races. And one might argue that maybe the stiffer rear wing or maybe the tire pressures had something to do with that. Antonio, who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, but Alfa Romeo, I mean, they were just running around. May as well be fighting it out with the horses, as far as I'm concerned. They're not making much of an impression on me this year, that's for sure.
How the that's possible?
I don't know.
I don't know. It's a shame. I was watching the Alphas, during the race, I'm like, they could be just anybody out there right now. They're just not making an impression on the race at all.
It could be just, who knows? All right. Where the heck are we?
Horse update.
Oh, a Haas update. Yes. Well,
everyone's waiting for this one.
They're
going to get to Haas. When?
What does it all mean, Banzo?
I know. We've been waiting the whole podcast for the Haas update. Screw, the other guys. I'm waiting for the Haas. Yeah. Mick Schumacher, P19, Nikita Mazepin, P20. Mick and Nikita swapped spots a couple of times on track. They kept their noses clean, though. Nikita wasn't like swerving into Mick and claiming Mick's name and, and blah, blah, and Mick's a prima donna and all that. He didn't do any of that. And he didn't grab Mick's chest, which is good. Yes. So they kept their nose clean. It was unfortunate. They didn't do better because they had their first Q2 performance of the year, which I thought was good. Mick made it into Q2.
That's positive, yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, Ben did, and he couldn't run in Q2, but, at least the kid's trying.
Yep.
Right? And he got the team to Q2. I thought that was good.
Yeah, that was good. That was a surprise and probably the highlight of the team's weekend, quite honestly.
Yeah.
It was a shame he binned it, but I guess luckily he at least kept his starting position, right? But
right.
And likelihood was never going to qualify any more further than that. But absolutely positive there.
Yeah. Nikita said he wasn't sure the split strategy was the best thing to do as they were having a lot of tire wear. But here's what Gunther had to say. He said that the good news is that the gap between their drivers is coming down. So there's that.
There is that. Yeah. Why even have a strategy?
I don't know. I don't know. Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Just show up, put the tires on it. Okay, boys, go have fun. Don't even have a pit stop, just put them on the hards.
Go.
Fastest area.
Why not? All right. Paul?
Yeah.
It's time for Move of the Race. Woo!
Get down.
All right, Paul. Your Move of the Race?
Move of the race, getting out of Paul Ricard. No, my move of the race is the undercut, of course, the all-powerful undercut.
The all-powerful undercut. My move of the race was Red Bull's strategy for both Max and Perez. I thought that was...
which also included the undercut.
Right.
Right. I mean, it was
Crazy
a
Max
part
was
of
after that,
it.
so can't let anybody past.
That's Crazy Max out there. Nico's becoming quite the gadfly in the paddock, isn't he?
Is he?
Well, kind of.
Because I watched the F1 TV thing, so I don't see
Oh,
much
he's always
of him.
pulling at the threads. Oh, you watch the one that has like the Will and at the
Yes.
like the
And the other
desk.
people who I don't know who they are.
Boy, those people are
Or
young.
what they know. But they don't know a lot about Formula One, I'll tell you that much. But they're very bubbly.
Yeah, they are.
bubbly.
Yeah.
And when they ask those really mundane questions, they say them with sincerity.
They do. They do. Hey, to tell us more about the race, let's go to this teenager.
How was it? It was great. Yeah.
Max, is a tough race. Talk us through it.
Yeah. That's painful, man.
Bring something to the broadcast.
Yeah, please.
Yes. Okay, then. Fair. I'll leave it there. Next award is Donkey of the Race. All right. Who'd you
Donkey.
got?
Well, the only guy that's probably for this is one Nico Rosberg because he's just so excited about most things. But my donkey is the F1 ludicrous graphics, pulling stats out of their bottoms.
Oh my gosh.
That was painful.
That corner max was 92.3%, but Lewis is 94.8, Paul.
Lewis wins. What does that mean, Basil, as they say?
Yes. Oh, I have that,
nothing.
Paul.
What does it all mean, Basil?
It means nothing. Nothing.
What are the metrics?
I don't know what they're measuring or how they're measuring it or who's actually putting this stuff out there. But I know Crofty was excited about it, but
yeah, Brundle was like, well, that's a number.
It's a number. Someone
It's a
threw some
number.
stats out there. What does that mean? How do they do it? Please stop. Just stop.
Just stop.
The tire wear thing, obviously, oh my God, he's only got 10% of his tire left. Oh, but then he does another 20 laps. Then maybe that 10% wasn't quite accurate.
Yeah.
But yeah, now measuring how well someone went through a corner and how much they maximized it versus what the car potential was. I'm sorry. I don't know any team can actually measure that at this point. Certainly not on the fly during a Grand Prix.
I don't even understand the metrics. So they go, well, we use sophisticated algorithms because we're AWS. And it's like, I'm not buying it. Let's see.
Graphic and shove it.
Yes.
Where you pulled it out of, please.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. I am giving it to Ferrari for my donkey of the race.
Yes.
That's fitting.
Struggle. Or for the new tire pressure rules.
And you know how painful that is for me, being a hardened Ferrari fan.
This is Enzo Ferrari.
You know,
I know it's a big emotion for you.
It's Paul, you're prompting me, aren't you?
And it's always a big emotion.
Yes, I am.
It is a big
Pull them all
emotion.
out. Yeah.
I saw this cool article on Ferrari's website that showed that the Cavallino is reopening after remodeling. And they have this picture of the room that Enzo would sit in with his team members or whatever and eat. And when I was in Italy, we went over and ate lunch there. And we ate lunch in that room. And I was looking at the picture. I sat in the same chair that Enzo was in that chair.
Oh, my goodness. Did everyone just stop and listen to every word you said?
Not a word. Not
Okay.
a word. No, not a
Didn't
word.
give you any superpowers?
Did
or
no
anything?
superpowers, no genius rubbed off, nothing.
Okay. That's a crying shame right
Yeah,
there.
it's a shame. I was expecting more there.
But it's fun to sit in the seat, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's set the same seat. All right. Well, that's fine. All right. Well, the next award's drive the race.
Hey! Ow! Good God!
Get down.
Get in there, Lewis.
All right.
Put that cookie down.
Who'd you give
yes.
drive?
I'm giving it to Russell. I mean,
Yeah, it
you're
was a
driving the
great drive.
Williams, which, I need to go sit in that car and ride around for that last half of the race, but pretty impressive who he beat, driver-wise and car-wise, and to, let's say, nearly be in the points. All fair, all cars finishing, I think, was a heck of a drive for that boy.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, I agree. I'm giving.
You'd really
Max.
enjoy it when he's driving the Mercedes next year.
He's gonna love. It's performances like this that are really gonna show up in that Mercedes next year.
Yeah.
I agree. I totally agree. I'm giving it to Max.
I'm driving like a grandma.
Yeah, great job. Great race.
Yeah,
great
fast
execution.
Grandma. Very much so.
Yeah, you had to execute, and he was on scrubbed mediums and came back. And as you said, Paul, it's one thing to roll the dice, gamble on a two-stopper, and pit out of the lead and hand that to Lewis. You're not handing it to Yuki Tsunoda. You're not handing it to Lance Stroll. You are handing it to a champion in Lewis Hamilton. Then to go in, put on scrub tires, come back out, and not overcook those tires, trying desperately to get back as fast as you possibly can and cook your own tires. That is a measured performance, a Lewis type performance, and a champion type performance. And I thought he did a great job.
He is. He's driving very champion like.
Yes, he is. Very champion-y. Yes. All right. Mailbag, Paul.
You've got mail.
We got mail.
Oh, great.
I got mail from Mark Rossetti, and he says, "Hi, Todd. Like you, I was pretty upset with the decision of the off-season to shorten FP1 and FP2. As someone who watches nearly every session each race weekend, I was appalled, but what I thought was a hasty and misguided idea to spice up the show, as they say. However, now that we are roughly a third of the way through the season, I could admit I was wrong. The shorter sessions are more hectic and, in my opinion, have a lot less downtime as teams have to get their normal run programs as well as any aero rake or flow viz work. I'm curious if you two have come around on the shorter sessions. Or if you still prefer 90 minutes.
Would you like to go first?
I would like to go first.
He
I was
said
just waiting on you.
It said Todd. He didn't
did
say Paul
say
and Todd.
Yeah,
Now,
but
normally-
nobody cares what I think, Paul. They only care what you think.
No, if he cares, he said Todd. He didn't say
I
Todd.
know.
I mean, sometimes they say this is
he's
for
being
Paul.
nice.
That question wasn't for me. It was
He's just
for you.
being nice. What he really means is, what does Paul think?
Okay.
All right.
Well,
here's what I think, Paul. Do you want to know what I think?
yes.
No,
and he does too.
I agree with you, Mark. I think the compressed session means they got to do a lot more of their program in that session. They've lost an hour, so they have to compress everything. You see the aero work. You see more cars on track more frequently through that whole time. I agree that compressed thing really does add more activities for those periods. And I would say I think the teams have adopted pretty well to it, all things considered. The reason for me liking the 90-minute structure wasn't so much for the on-track action. It was for the commentary and what I learned from listening to PDR from Ant, from Crofty or whomever.
Or in the olden days, Steve Matchett.
Or in the old days, Steve Matchett, or Ted Kravitz, right? So it's the interviews that they revealed they had, or it's just the casual conversations that the commentary have over an hour and a half. And you start to pick all of these little things up, even little tidbits. Ted drops or PDR is great. He'll drop a few things. And sometimes they have a little more room in the broadcast to segue into some things like driving and why that's an important driving skill, or why this is a development, or, the more time I have to spend with Formula One like-minded people revealing information that I don't have access to, the more I like it. So... Yep. Yeah, but I agree with your reasoning, Mark. I'm not disagreeing with you. That compressed activity is more exciting to watch, but that's really not the only reason I watch those sessions.
Yeah, very true. And I agree 100%. That's exactly what I was going to say. Okay. It's a bit more laid back, a little casual. You can actually look at things with a bit more, calmness to it. And maybe not everyone's, if 20 cars are running around all at the same time, how can you focus on what all of them are doing properly, right? So, and I like the little elements in between, where, as you say, you've got Ant there breaking down a corner. They just don't have that time. And before or after, everyone's kind of gone and done with it. So that is the beauty of the more stretched out sessions. I'd rather that information, which is a big part of Formula One. It is. It's not just about passing. It's not just about speed. It's about tactics. It's about evolution of a car. It's about so many technical deviance between one car and the next. So
yeah, and I just think
great
that
to see that analysis.
It is, and I just think that there's comments and stories that come out of, like, if Crofty says something, well, I was walking the track circuit talking to so and so, or whatever it is, and that corner is a lot steeper than you think it is, or whatever. It's just these little nuances that you pick up in the normal workaday conversations that the broadcast team are having that adds so much more to Formula One for me anyway. And that's why I got so deep into Formula One when I was young, because all of that information I harvest and take on board. Now, in my advanced age, I forget a lot of it, but anyway, I enjoy it when it's happening.
There you go.
Yeah.
Way to go. Huh?
Thanks, man. All right, next question. Jeffrey Smith asked us about qualifying, Paul, and I'm going to throw this out to you because, Jeffrey, I don't know that I'm smart enough to figure this out, but I'm going to throw it to Paul. He was talking about qualifying, and he says he knows everyone loves the current qualifying format, knockout qualifying. He knows that, but he was thinking this might be a better idea, and here's why. He says, keep the first session as it is. It's fine and engaging, but the second session would differ in that it would be a competition for starting order in session 3. Session 3 would be a single car qualifying with the fastest car from session 2 presenting last on presumably the best rubbered in track.
Right. Well, that really reduces track time for any of the teams.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you're single car qualifying in practice 3, then that isn't a practice at all. So really, you're only giving the teams one session to actually not be in competition and be able to figure their car out. Because if you open up practice 2 for a qualifying slot, you're already qualifying already.
No, he's talking about Q1, Q2, Q3.
Oh, I see. I thought you were talking about practice sessions.
No, qualifying.
Okay.
So keep Q1 as it is. Q2 is a competition for the starting order in Q3, and Q3 ends up being single car qualifying with the fastest car from session 2, Q2, as the last one to go.
I gotcha. So Q1 doesn't mean anything.
Same as it is.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean anything because he's saying everyone goes through, or 16
well, you'd
go
eliminate
through.
5, yeah.
Okay, so you're still eliminating people in practice.
Same
1.
as it is, yep.
Okay, and in session 2, you're eliminating people still?
Session 2 is the starting order in session 3. I'm assuming he also would eliminate another 5.
You would still eliminate? Okay.
Yeah.
For some reason, it wasn't showing any eliminations. It just seemed like everyone was
you didn't
kind
say
of staying in it, right?
Come on, Jeffrey, tell us what the heck you mean. It's hard to figure this out.
What do you mean? I don't understand your words.
I don't understand, Jeffrey. You have me confused. No,
okay.
It's an interesting concept.
So basically rolling into single car qualifying for Q3.
Yeah. So session 1 is what it is. Eliminate 5. Session 2, it sets the qualifying order
right
in Q3
for the top 10
You're still going to
shootout.
eliminate for the top 10 shootout. So your top 10 would be single car qualifying with the fastest car from Q2 as the last one to go on track.
Well then, okay. I mean, that's fine, reasonable. It'd be interesting to see it.
Yeah.
The only problem is everyone would then say, well, they're doing these things to try and mix up the starting order. But if you give the fastest driver the best track conditions, then there's not really going to be a lot of mixing up and differences. Someone can't miss a lap or do this or that. So I don't think it would change too much. It would be interesting to see. I'm not against it, but I'm not sure. I think sometimes it's kind of exciting when everyone's out there at the same time, just trying to run the same lap, and it's just like bing, 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 bing. Who's doing what and where? But I can.
Right.
We saw single qualifying, number of years ago.
Yeah, we used to have it.
And it was decent, but I think it was a bit just watching one car go. I guess it's not that bad, really, is it?
I liked it
because you get to measure from sector to sector, and you really get to focus on that one car at a time.
Every
right?
team gets full TV coverage.
I'm
Every driver gets. No, I'm not either. I actually enjoyed. I'm one of the freaks that didn't dislike the previous qualifying and old, from the late 90s or whatever. I like the single lap qualifying
Yeah.
because, like you said, Paul, I could measure every single driver through that turn, every single driver through that straight or the hairpin or whatever. And you
Right.
could see this. And you
Time
also,
up, time down, and
and
the
you could
pressure was
see-
on the driver. I don't know if the pressure's higher, but it is pretty high when you just got one lap.
you got one lap, but you got to be careful too because you
Yeah.
got one lap.
Right. Right.
So it was a fine line, right, between that.
Yeah.
So anyway, let us know what you guys think of it. Please send all hate mail to Jeffrey Smith, and not me. All right, this isn't my idea. It's Jeffrey's, and I thought it was an intriguing idea, and I told Jeffrey I would share it with everyone, and let me know what you think. But in the meantime, stop by the website, theparcfermé.com.
Buy some t-shirts.
Do some stuff, would you? Say something.
Comment. Say something.
Say
Buy
some stuff. Yeah, say some stuff. Whatever.
Just don't be mean.
If you like the podcast, go to iTunes. Give us a good rating. Why not?
Why not? What the hell? What else you doing?
Yeah. Find a Patreon supporter and pat them on the back because that's the only reason this podcast exists is for our Patreon supporters. And thanks for you out there who have emailed me personally and said, hey, Todd, put ads in the YouTube thing. Good grief. It's a free podcast. You've been doing it forever and a day. You guys deserve it. And those people who don't like the ads, they can watch something else. So thanks for the support on that. Apologize for the outrageously frequent ads. That wasn't my intent, but it doesn't tell you for 2 ads, press this button. For 4 ads, it's YouTube. It's like, okay, you want a banner ad? Well, okay. Do you want to start the
How
video
much
with
money
a
do you
5-second
want,
ad?
Todd?
No, just what kinds of ads you want. And if you say, okay, well, any one of these formats is okay. Well, it's also determining how frequently it's going to put ads. I was like, well, no, I don't want one every 30 seconds. Good grief. So, yeah.
I listened to the podcast. I didn't watch the YouTube from last time, so I didn't see or hear
you
any
didn't miss
ads.
anything.
Yeah.
So, anyway, it's like all our podcasts. It's not worth listening to. So, anyway, thank you for the support. But don't fear, folks, because Paul and I are going to be back in just, a few days.
Just days.
Just mere days. Yeah.
I'll be calling it for upstate New York. I hope they have good Wi-Fi up there.
Oh, I do too. Yeah. I'm going to be a little strangerous up there at the Glens. Well, yeah, I hope they got good Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I know. Hopefully I'm staying in the Jim Clark room or something.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah.
That'd be good. So anyway, we'll be back. We're going to be talking about the Styrian Grand Prix.
Like it a little better than the Paul Ricard. So that's good.
I think so.
I like
It's
that track.
Picturesque Austria. Everything. Every time I see Austria, it looks like a postcard.
Yep.
It's nice. So be sure to tune in for that. Until that time, next week, when we come back to do it all over again, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camera, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.